knockout ever captured on film. After 8 brutal rounds, Ollie came off the ropes and hit Foreman with a lightning-fast combination that sent him tumbling towards the ground. Instead of throwing follow-up punches, Ollie stared Foreman down as he seemed to fall in slow motion towards the floor. No one at the time had given Ollie much of a chance, despite all of his talent and experience. This was mostly because of Foreman's immense power. Big George had walked through almost every competitor he had ever faced, with his longest fight being an epic slugfest with Ron Lyle that lasted just 5 rounds. Ollie knew he couldn't outmuscle Foreman. If he wanted to win, he had to outsmart him. Foreman's style was built upon controlling his opponent's arms to set up his punches.
Morris, Jones, Hogan, Player, Palmer.
He would hold his hands far out and paw at his competitor's guard. He was looking to smother them, knock them off balance, and pull down their hands and head.
EA Sports, in conjunction with the RNA, present.
But from the opening bout, Ollie had a way to turn all of Foreman's best tricks against him. When Foreman extended his hands to paw at Ollie, he created an opening in his guard. Ollie was able to time Foreman and throw a quick straight punch in between the narrow space.
Next 4 days, we've got big names, we've got dark horses, we've got it all. As we look at the leaderboard,
when Foreman tried to pull down and trap one of Ollie's hands, Ollie simply pulled his hand back. He could depend on his incredible head movement to keep him safe, while Foreman barely ever moved his head at all. Without trapping Ollie's hand, Foreman had only succeeded in opening himself up for attack. One of the most effective techniques Foreman used in his many fights was to set up his punches by pushing his opponent's head or shoulder. This would knock his competitors off balance and give Foreman time to load up on a powerful blow. But Ollie had made a career out of slipping his head past his opponent's jab and throwing a cross over their shoulder. When Foreman left his arm extended to push at Ollie, it was the easiest thing in the world for him to treat it like a slow jab and throw his right hand over it.
That's a disappointment right there, Frank. Yeah, green light special, really. Come up considerably short.
While Ollie's strategy to use Foreman's wrestling against him was working incredibly well, it soon became clear that he had underestimated Foreman's skill at cutting off the ring. Foreman was able to repeatedly corner Ollie and land powerful blows. At first, Ollie tried his best to get off the ropes, with mixed results. But then, he did something that nobody expected. He leaned back on the ropes and began to taunt Foreman, daring him to punch harder.
That he's covering up because he's hurt, and boy, I went to finish him. I threw everything I had. 1 round, 2 rounds, 3 rounds. He'd cover up again, hit me, cover up again, and after about the 6th round, I hit him with some good shots. He failed on me, really, and I thought he was giving up, and he said, "George, that all you got, George? Show me something." And I realized all those punches were basically a waste.
Ollie wasn't just taking punishment, he was deflecting blows off of his forearms and elbows, using the lax ropes to slip punches, and wrestling Foreman to tire him out. Almost every time Foreman went to the body, Ollie would pull his head down to take away his stability. No stability, no power. Still, Ollie was taking more damage with each passing round.
And after about the 6th round, I hit him with some good shots. He failed on me, really.
But after 8 brutal rounds, Ollie's plan had paid off. Foreman was on unstable footing, plodding forward on willpower alone, with barely any energy left.
I'm going to tell you right now, I was the most tired I've ever been in my life. I don't understand. That fight was going to go on for another 5 rounds or so. I don't know if I would have made it anyway.
Lovely pitch shot.
Let's take a look at the last exchange. Foreman opens up his guard to paw, desperate to control Ollie's hands to set up a fight-ending punch with the little energy he has left. Ollie fires a quick 1-2 in between his hands. Foreman has managed to get a hand on Ollie's shoulder, but Ollie pushes Foreman away and jabs to get some distance. Foreman probes with his lead hand to try to control Ollie's head, but Ollie slips and pulls Foreman's hand over his shoulder, taking a hold of the back of Foreman's head and turning him. Foreman is now in a terrible position, unable to attack, defend, or even see his opponent. Ollie hits him with a hard right. Foreman throws an uppercut that deflects off of Ollie's elbow, and again extends his hand to try to gain some control. Ollie repeats the same sequence used a second ago, this time turning Foreman all the way onto the ropes. Dazed and desperate, Foreman again opens his guard to try to clinch, and Ollie dances away, attacking with short, tight punches. Ollie circles around as he punches, keeping Foreman off balance. He connects with an angled, whipping hook loaded up from behind his back. At this point, Foreman is done. Ollie finishes the job with a cross, and watches the man the world told him could not be beat fall to the floor. It's one of the greatest knockdowns from one of the most epic fights between two of the most skilled fighters to ever enter the ring. Let us know in the comments section what fights you'd like to see broken down from boxing, kickboxing, or MMA. I'm happy to say I've got two pretty big announcements. The first is that I've opened a sub on Reddit where you can post and share videos, articles, and personal posts about techniques and training. The sub is simply called Fight Right, and I've left a link below. The second announcement is that I'm finishing up a book on how the pros generate power in striking. It's advanced techniques boiled down into simple principles and easy to use drills. It comes with links to exclusive breakdown videos on the world's greatest knockout artists to help explain each section. You can pre-order now and get half off with the link below. For the modern martial artist, this has been David Christian, wishing you happy training.
With Ashley's next-gen Nuvella Performance fabric, you can relax. These pieces are easy to clean, and some styles feature machine washable.
Thomas the Hitman Hearns had one of the best 1-2s of any fighter in history. His cross is legendary and was the downfall of many talented fighters. There are some who brush Hearns' skills aside, saying that his success was due only to superior reach and height. But this is simplifying an incredibly talented and tactical boxer. Instead of coasting on his advantages, Hearns did everything he could to amplify his gifts and eliminate his weaknesses. He turned his lead hand into a highly versatile tool, used to set up his devastating right. Hearns could adjust his jab to fit just about any purpose. His most effective version was a technique that's sometimes referred to as a lazy jab, where he delayed the retraction of his hand to keep his competitor's vision obscured. By taking his hand away at the last second, he was able to hide his cross behind it. Notice how his hand stays pinned to his opponent as he steps into his punch. Hearns would also flick his jab and circle to the inside like his hero Ali, pestering his adversary and taking a superior angle. But beyond these basics, Hearns could use his lead hand in a number of more complex ways. Hearns would often stiff-arm his competitor to keep him at range and block his vision for extended periods of time. In the same way that Roberto Duran liked to control his opponent's head on the inside, Hearns liked to control it from the outside. He would lean his weight down on his adversary's neck, disturbing his balance and turning him. He also liked to turn his lead jab or hook into a collar tie, pulling his competitor into his punch. Many people criticize Hearns for the tendency to sometimes lower his jab after he threw it, but this was done intentionally to knock away his opponent's guard, creating a brief opening to take advantage of. Hearns had what's known as a chopping right hand. The power of his blow wasn't sent forward, but downwards towards the floor. He would pull his hand back and then sharply turn his elbow up at the last second. This trajectory not only allowed his hand to pass over his opponent's guard, but the rapidly shortening arc gave him an incredible force and follow-through. In fact, many of his best punches hit not with his knuckles, but with the palm of his hand or forearm. The sharp downward curve allowed him to get a lot of momentum on a very tight and close punch, much like Golovkin does today. Combined with Hearns' aggressive angling footwork, his active lead hand, and powerful cross made him a master of boxing's staple combination. Sometimes, all it takes is a good 1-2. We are now halfway through the 4 Kings of Boxing. Check out the 2 Duran videos, and let everyone know in the comments if you'd like to see Sugar Ray Leonard or Marvelous Marvin Hagler next. Check out my Patreon for my MMA videos, and donate if you'd like to help support the channel. For the modern martial artist, this has been David Christian, wishing you happy training.
I've had this ad blocker for 1 week, and it's already blocked over 1,000 ads. Meet Pi, a Chrome extension that blocks ads, and it's completely free. What's really crazy is that if you opt in, Pi will actually pay you to see ads. And if it sounds too good to be true, trust me, it's not. It has thousands of 5-star reviews, plus they
Roberto Duran was perhaps the greatest lightweight of all time. He built a style around infighting that was entirely unique, using grappling to supplement his striking and ring control. Many of his techniques fell out of use in boxing, and have only recently seen a resurgence in mixed martial arts. In the last breakdown, we looked at how Duran used grappling to upset his opponent's balance and manipulate their distance. This time, we'll look at how Duran transitioned from these wrestling ties to trap his opponent's arms and create new openings of attack. We'll start with Duran's favorite position, an overhook. Duran would stop using this position to wrestle his opponent and instead trap his arm in the crook of his elbow or side. He would then throw a shovel hook to his opponent's exposed ribs. Duran could either twist his opponent's elbow up or pull his arm straight. Although Duran had a limited grip with his boxing gloves, he could use his wrists or elbows to execute a surprising amount of pulls. Duran could effectively use underhooks for this same purpose, tilting his opponent into his punch and amplifying his power. Duran also used underhooks for ring control, turning his opponents if he got caught on the ropes, and attacking them while they were off balance. Cutting off the ring on Duran wasn't a reliable strategy for his opponents, as they were essentially just taking themselves to the corner for him. The last position Duran commonly used to set up his punches was a collar tie. He would grab his opponent's neck and pull his head into the punch. Duran also used head control to trap his opponents in place to set up his cross. I mentioned last time that Duran was an expert at hand fighting his opponent to find impossibly tight angles from which to attack. His most brilliant technique was to wait for his opponent to overcommit by pushing too hard, and then disengage to attack the new opening. This became even more confusing for his opponents when Duran suddenly switched the purpose of either hand, turning his grappling hand into his striking hand, and vice versa. In fact, Duran's most powerful close-range attack involved him using his normally offensive lead hand to clear space for his grappling hand to throw a devastating uppercut. This insanely tight, diagonal uppercut whipped his opponent's head back, positioning it perfectly to follow up with the lead hook. At the beginning of his fights, Duran kept his head on his opponent's lead shoulder, out of reach from his power hand. But as the fight went on, Duran began to move out of this position into progressively more offensive ones. While some talented boxers can move into close range to attack and then back out to safety, Duran's strategy was to do the exact opposite, moving out to attack and then back into safety. Leaning his head on his opponent's rear shoulder allowed Duran to attack his head with rear hooks and crosses, and allowed him the reach to deliver his devastating liver shots. Duran could deftly switch between either shoulder position, weaving his head over or under his opponents to attack different angles and avoid blows. The precision with which he did this was nothing short of incredible. When Duran knew he had his opponent beat, he would straighten up and move out to mid-range to attack with more power. His strategy was to weave or roll into mid-range to punch, and then move back to either shoulder position for safety. It was a constant changing of positions between these 3 points, with Duran's non-stop head movement loading up his punches and keeping him safe at the same time. In the end, it wasn't Duran's infighting that was the most dangerous aspect of his game, but instead, it was his ability to seamlessly move between all ranges, which made him one of the greatest masters boxing has ever seen. For the modern martial artist, this has been David Christian, wishing you happy training.
This is a 9-footer.
See you later.
Okay, good roll there. It is a par here at the 8th.
If you're looking for a career where you can really make a difference in the world, to help and connect with others,
Lomachenko has some of the best footwork ever seen in the ring, and his most unique sequence is what I like to call his matrix shuffle. The matrix shuffle is actually a combination of a pivot and a shuffle. As you swing your back foot around a pivot, you're also going to bring it towards your front foot. The momentum will get you airborne and swing you around to the other side of your opponent. Today we're going to break down the move with step-by-step drills that you can do on the bag or with a partner. I covered Lomachenko's footwork and feints in a prior breakdown video, so you might want to check that out after you're done with this one. Let's begin by looking at the setup. The first thing Lomachenko does is to step in with the jab or feint. This lets him sneak his back foot up to a narrow stance in preparation. This will feel weird if you're not used to it, but it's pretty easy to get down. Next, he steps far to the outside, usually blocking his opponent's vision by feinting across. The motion should almost feel like giving the mitts a high five. The next part is deceptively difficult, so let's build it step by step. First, perform the setup, and then shuffle past your partner. Next, add a turn to the shuffle, so you end up facing your partner. And now try it with a pivot. Once you're comfortable, try combining these motions together, and you basically have it. Now let's look at a few tips to make it go smooth. You want to step your foot out at an outside angle, landing on your heel first. This gives you plenty of room to pivot off your lead foot as you swing your back foot around. You should begin moving your back foot to your front almost as soon as you start your pivot. The momentum should carry both of your feet off the ground, and both your knees should be bent. Spread your feet out wide before you land for a stable base. Practice punching after you land, and you have the matrix shuffle down. Once you're comfortable, you could try adding on some trickier moves, like pulling down your opponent's guard, or leaning on them if they duck under your jab. You can also try an angle shift by jumping off of both feet, which was one of Tyson's favorite moves. I'd like to give a big thanks to my friend Iman Rashid for helping me out with the video. Not only is he a great fighter, but he's the best performance martial artist I've ever met. I left a link to his Instagram below, you should all check him out. From the Modern Martial Artist, this has been David Christian, wishing you happy training.
The gap wedge, and this is going to end up long.
That is not very good at all. That could cost him.
It's time to break down the hands of stone, Roberto Duran. Duran ended his 5-decade career having won world championships in 4 different weight classes. He had knocked out 70 competitors in 119 professional fights. Duran was a technical master at close-range fighting, with many of his hardest punches in any given match traveling only inches to their target. Although much is made of Duran's infighting, he was a highly skilled boxer on the outside as well. In fact, it was his ability to effortlessly manipulate distance that made him such a formidable fighter. Duran's strategy was to tie up his opponents and brutalize them from the inside to wear down their defenses. Duran would punch his way into close range, utilizing unpredictable jabs, feints, and head movement. Instead of snapping his punches back to his guard, Duran would circle his hands over and under his opponent's guard and into a hold. He was essentially combining his striking and grappling into one movement. Duran was most successful with a shifting 1-2, widening his cross around his opponent and then inside their lead arm. Another staple entering combination was the jab uppercut, allowing Duran to take an inside position right away. Either of these combinations could be followed with the lead hook that would control his competitor's opposite hand. Duran would employ these same techniques defensively, ducking in and circling his hands inside. Once Duran had control of his opponent's arms, he had control of the fight. Duran usually dedicated one hand to striking and one hand to grappling, and would switch between the two whenever it gave him an advantage to do so. The grappling hand was essential to Duran's strategy. He consistently disturbed his opponent's balance with overhooks, underhooks, and collar ties, taking away their base of support and limiting their power. Duran's constant wrestling and barrage of inside punches would exhaust his competitors. At the same time he was manipulating their balance, Duran was using his other hand to find an inside angle from which to attack. This was very similar to the hand fighting that wrestlers engage in to get a superior position, except used to set up strikes instead of throws. A modified elbow tie was now ideal for tight hook punches, while an inside position lent itself well to uppercuts. Duran was obsessed with taking the tightest possible angle of attack, always keeping his arms as close as possible to his ribs. This not only allowed him to consistently beat his opponent to the punch, but left them less openings to attack as well. Duran was able to use the feel of his opponent's arms against his own to interpret their intent, and defend against their movements almost simultaneously. When he felt a punch coming, he could stiff arm his opponent, or stop the punch short by pushing against their arm. When he felt an absence of touch, he knew his opponent was loading up, and he would duck, weave, or roll away from the oncoming blows. As his opponent tired, Duran tied him up less and abandoned his tight-angled punches. He instead fought shoulder to shoulder, moving out to mid-range to throw more loaded strikes, before weaving back to safety on the inside. While Duran kept his head leaning heavily on his opponent's shoulder, he gave his hips much more space. This meant he was deceptively far away, and could easily move between mid and close range simply by moving his torso. It also meant he could generate a great deal of power by shifting his weight from his front foot to his back foot. Most of Duran's fights ended with him chasing after an already beaten and battered opponent. In part 2, we'll look at Duran's more complex techniques, including countering from the inside and multi-hand trapping and striking. So subscribe to stay tuned. Check out my Patreon if you want to help me create more videos at a faster pace. There's also videos on my Patreon that are not available on my YouTube channel, and there's no need to donate to see them. Let me know which of the 4 kings of boxing you'd like to see broken down next. So far, the Hitman is ahead. From the Modern Martial Artist, this has been David Christian, wishing you happy training.
Yeah, it might be in the rough, but that was absolutely
Sugar Ray Leonard,
So now with the ball below his feet, gotta be
Marvelous
careful this
Marvin
doesn't
Hagler.
go right.
Thomas Hitman Hearns, and the Hands of Stone, Roberto Duran. These men ruled the ring during the last golden age of boxing. They rose from poverty and obscurity to become legends. They left their marks on history and on each other. Their styles and their personalities were diverse, but each man would come to know the others well, as they fought for the prize of being the greatest of an era.
For par here at 13, and he'll stay right where he is.
Duran grew up in poverty in a desperately poor slum in Panama. He was kicked out of school in the 4th grade when he tried to beat up his male teacher and then kiss the female replacement. Left to fend for himself on the streets, shining shoes and selling newspapers, young Duran often had to defend his corner against older boys. For him, fighting was not a sport, but a necessary tool for survival. Perhaps due to this deep familiarity with violence, Duran would become known for his brutality and ferocity in the ring. But far from a mindless brawler, Duran became a technical master at close-range fighting. He used precision adjustments to find and create small openings to attack. His victories came through precision adjustments of mere inches. Especially impressive was his ability to get inside his opponent's guard without taking any damage himself. In the beginning, Duran made very little money for his fights. But after yet another dominant victory, he was approached by local millionaire Carlos Alita. Duran had met Alita 5 years earlier, when Alita had caught him climbing his trees to steal coconuts off of his estate. Now with their reacquaintance, Duran had proper management, and went on to dominate his division, knocking out his opponents in the first round in his first 7 fights, and ending his career as a 4-weight world champion. As a teenager, Hagler had been beaten up at a party in front of his friends by a local boxer. The very next day, he entered the Petronelli brothers' gym. The owner there told him how difficult boxing would be and the sacrifices it would entail, and then asked him if he still had his heart set on it. Hagler replied, "Yeah, and one day I'm going to be champion of the world." Hagler would eventually fight the boxer who had beat him up at the party, and returned the favor, taking his then perfect record. Initially, Hagler had a tough time finding opponents, as nobody wanted to fight a southpaw. This led to him changing to an orthodox stance before changing back to boxing southpaw again. By a happy accident, Hagler had gained the versatility of a multi-stance fighter, something which would help him greatly during the course of his career. Hagler had incredible power and a near indestructible chin. He reigned as the undisputed middleweight champion from 1980 to 1987, making 12 defenses of that title.
And he'll move to within 3 of the lead at 4 under par.
As a child, Thomas Hearns found himself in the rare situation of being the tallest kid in his class and also constantly bullied. Always skinny, all of his calories seemed to go to his height, and Hearns' potential as a fighter didn't seem especially promising at first. But after he stopped growing and put on some muscle, Hearns began to dominate every opponent he fought. In fact, Hearn's slender build and height would eventually allow him to win 5 belts in different weight divisions. By far, Hearn's most impressive feature was his incredible 1-2. Hearns perfected this staple boxing combination and used it as the backbone of his strategy. His jab by itself was an incredibly well-developed tool, which he used to block his opponent's vision, measure distance, and stay at long range. His cross was frankly terrifying, and he threw it near the same manner as the great Joe Louis. Every one of Hearn's fights against the other 3 kings of boxing turned out to be an instant classic.
Just to get it into the green side bunker. Now well positioned, especially with a little savvy bunker shot.
Leonard's gym at the Palmer Park Rec Center didn't have a ring. The students instead sparred on a basketball court with tape marking the boundaries, and they had to stop practice every time someone wanted to play basketball. The hard surface of the ground made them acutely aware of the need for balance, and especially reluctant to get knocked down. These were attributes that Sugar Ray would keep with him throughout his career. Leonard took inspiration for his style from Sugar Ray Robinson and Muhammad Ali. He used fast, fluid motion and complex footwork to outmaneuver and confuse his opponents. His hand speed was second to none, and he had the heart to fight through to victory even when in deep water. After winning a gold medal for America at the Olympics, Leonard declared that his boxing days were over and looked forward to collecting a long list of promised endorsements. However, when it came out that he had had a child out of wedlock with his longtime girlfriend, the media portrayed him as a deadbeat dad. His endorsements dropped, and Leonard decided to turn pro. It turned out to be an excellent decision. Leonard would end his career as a world champion in 5 weight classes. All 4 of these exceptional fighters would face each other in the ring. In another era, any one of them could have dominated several weight divisions for years. But in the last golden age of boxing, each man would form deep rivalries and take each other to the limits of their talent, stamina, and willpower. Let everyone know which of these fighters you'd like to see broken down first in the comment section. A good deal of the information for this video came from the fascinating book, 4 Kings. It's a great read, and I've left a link below if you'd like to check it out. This has been David Christian from the Modern Martial Artist.
On now to the finishing hole.
Happy training.
It's the par 4 18.
Iron Mike Tyson was one of the most exciting and controversial champions of our lifetime. Explosive and unpredictable, Tyson was like a stick of dynamite that could go off at any second. In his prime, he was always in the perfect position to deliver a knockout blow that would appear to come out of nowhere and send his opponent flying across the ring. Tyson was trained by arguably the greatest boxing coach of all time, Cus D'Amato. D'Amato honed Tyson into an aggressive counterpuncher by teaching Mike his style of fighting, the same style he had taught Floyd Patterson years before, and commonly referred to as the peekaboo style. The peekaboo style is generalized as simply slipping your opponent's attack in a tight guard before opening up to deliver a power blow. But that's just the first step in D'Amato's ingenious system. A system that took full advantage of the fact that Tyson had knockout power in both hands and was also comfortable fighting with either foot forward. By using the peekaboo head movement, Tyson was able to get deep into his opponent's guard, placing his back foot right next to his opponent's front. This was an incredibly dangerous position for both Tyson and his opponent. But the beauty of this open, staggered stance was that Tyson could expertly transfer out of it into any angle he chose. Far from a wild brawler, Tyson knew each position inside and out, and chose the perfect punches to accompany his switching stances. To explain the nuances of all of them in depth would take several videos, but let's take a minute to really understand just how versatile Tyson was and how he knew every stance and every angle inside and out. Tyson could transition into an open southpaw stance with his right foot inside, a dominant angle to attack with your lead hand. An open southpaw stance with his right foot outside, a dominant angle from which to attack with your rear hand. An orthodox position almost completely behind his opponent, pretty much advantageous in every way possible. A southpaw position almost completely behind his opponent, even more dominant. He would sometimes shuffle right past his opponent and end up in a closed southpaw stance. Kind of like when you go out of screen on an old video game and end up on the other side. Many of his opponents mistook Tyson's aggression for stupidity, but he had one of the greatest ring IQs in boxing history. Tyson could seamlessly change stances by shuffling or stepping in any direction. This meant he could use either stance to cut off the ring, chase his opponents down, or shuffle and counter to the left or the right with little preparation. For an aggressive counterpuncher, this freedom of movement is the ultimate advantage. Tyson was an expert at using this technique to break through an opponent's guard. He used combinations of uppercuts and head and body hooks to decimate his competitors. He would shuffle inside to uppercut and outside to hook, just like Patterson did before him. This was a matter of precision, with Tyson readjusting his feet just a few inches to make the difference. His shifting footwork also allowed him to cover distance quickly while attacking. Here he looks very similar to one of his biggest idols, Jack Dempsey. Now let's look at how the peekaboo style greatly amplified the power in Tyson's punches. First, Tyson's extreme slips and shifts tended to load most of his weight onto one leg. And since the power of a punch is greatly increased by shifting weight from one foot to another, this meant Tyson's punches were preloaded with power, his defense serving to increase the potency of his offense. Tyson also tended to shuffle into moves that were normally stepped into, increasing his distance and momentum. He scored many knockouts simply moving into his favorite squared up, staggered stance. But more than anything, Tyson's power was maximized by his ability to catch his opponents unaware as they were coming in. Two expressions hold very true here. A punch that gets you coming in hits twice as hard, and it's the punches you don't see coming that hurt you. Very few people could pull off this style. It was possible for Tyson and Patterson because of their raw talent and the genius behind the peekaboo style. One of boxing's greatest trainers, Cus D'Amato. There will be a breakdown soon on the unique punches Tyson used and how he put so much power into them. So subscribe if you would like to see that or other breakdowns of other fighters in the future. My last two videos have been suggested by subscribers in the video before them, by the way. From the Modern Martial Artist, this has been David Christian, wishing you happy training.
Donate plasma today and receive up to $700 your first month. CSL Plasma. Do the amazing.
This is the Dempsey roll. It was used to topple a giant. The man who created it was Jack Dempsey, the Manasseh Mauler. The man being toppled is Jess Willard, heavyweight champion of the world. Willard was a head taller and 60 pounds heavier than Dempsey, but he would endure what would come to be known as the most brutal beatdown in boxing history. Dempsey was known for his extreme aggression, and his punches matched his personality. But at the same time, Dempsey put a lot of thought and subtlety into the mechanics of his boxing. In any given match, his opponent could go down from a wild swing or a tight, well-structured punch. The Dempsey roll was not one move, but a combination of punches built of Dempsey's unorthodox techniques that happened to result in one of the most beautiful knockdowns ever recorded on film. And the first pieces of it are what Dempsey names in his book as the drop step and trigger step. The drop step is how Dempsey began each punch to build momentum. He would lean all of his weight onto his front leg and then quickly lift it up. This triggered his back leg to save him from falling, quickly pushing him forward. This technique allowed Dempsey to put all of his weight into each punch, as he was essentially falling forward into his opponent and catching himself, with his fist, on their face. Dempsey spent pages in his book explaining how stepping into his punches massively increased his power, regardless of how close or how far away he was. For him, balance was not something to be maintained, but a tool to be manipulated for more force. As well as using drop steps, Dempsey also liked to shift into his punches. This brings us to the next part of the Dempsey roll, Dempsey's figure 8 bobs and weaves. Dempsey would switch into southpaw and back to chase after his opponents, bobbing and weaving to get close enough to throw a power blow, often making a figure 8 motion with his head as he did so. He would angle his steps, both to cut off the ring and take him offline. His weaving motion blended seamlessly into his punch and helped load it up with even more momentum. He used the same figure 8 motion to put his head offline and load up each punch in his Dempsey roll. This brings us to the last technique from Dempsey's book, the shoulder whirl. The shoulder whirl was Dempsey's way of explaining what is now commonly called the elastic band principle. It involves stretching your muscles as far as they can go until they whip back, like pulling on and then releasing a rubber band. Now let's look at how each piece fit into the Dempsey roll. First, Dempsey gets off angle and then shifts his weight forward with his drop step, quickly gaining distance. He ducks under Willard's jab with his bob and weave motion, putting his head offline and transferring his weight. From here, it's bob and weave shifting combined with the shoulder roll. The first 3 punches knock Willard's guard from side to side, and the 4th one connects with full force. Dempsey put tremendous power into his punches, and Willard would spend the next several minutes of his life taking the worst punishment ever seen in the ring. Jack Dempsey was the rarest of fighters, a dangerous combination of unrelenting aggression and sophisticated ring power. We'll end the breakdown with this interesting fact. At the age of 80, 2 young men tried to rob Jack Dempsey. After the dust had settled, he decided to let them go, saying in his biography, "In a way, I felt sorry for him. These are the kids that boxing could have helped." I've left an affiliate link to Dempsey's book Championship Fighting in the description below if you want to check it out. For the Modern Martial Artist, this has been David Christian, wishing you happy training.
Nothing to fault there. Safely in the fairway.
I can't help but feel good. I can't help but feel fine.
Archie Moore to this day holds the record for the most knockouts in boxing history, with an astonishing 132 KOs. He held the light heavyweight title for 10 years, losing it at the age of 46. Although Moore possessed natural speed and strength, his success, especially in his later years, is largely due to the fact that he was one of the most versatile and brilliant boxers to ever string up gloves. Moore was not only comfortable, but an expert at fighting in any stance, in any range, in any position. He could crouch low and crowd his opponent, or he could circle smoothly and sting him with jabs from the outside. He could clinch and brutalize from the inside, or he could outposition his competitor with superior angles. And always, he was ready to stand and trade punches. Perhaps the best way to begin to understand how Moore put all these techniques together is to isolate 2 aspects of his style: his punches and his cross-arm guard, and look at how they intertwined and flowed together seamlessly. Moore fought out of a cross guard, a style of fighting that allows for more protection. Most people can find the position makes their movement clumsy and awkward, but Archie Moore was not most people. When he squared up, his rear hand passed his center line and rested on his opposite shoulder, while his lead hand crossed over his stomach to rest near his hip. At long range, Moore stood sideways and used his rear hand to catch and parry his opponent's jab. But as soon as his competitor moved into mid or close range, his parry would turn into a forearm block, crossing over to his opposite shoulder as Moore squared up into an extremely defensive position. At close range, he was able to parry his opponent's lead hook off of his elbow. His rear hand, resting on his opponent's shoulder, provided protection for the left side of his head, and his lead arm guarded against uppercuts and body hooks. While this is undoubtedly a strange feeling position to fight from, it did something invaluable for Moore. It allowed him to practice offense and defense all in the same movement. Moore didn't need to wait to retract his punches back to his guard to block or parry. His punches turned into blocks or parries as they passed through his target. In a fight, when every split second counts, the ability to block or parry punches off of your strikes cannot be understated. Additionally, Moore would often frame off of these same blocks to set up yet another attack, repeating the cycle all over again. Moore's stable guard let him crash into his opponents off of his attacks, pressing close, smothering, and pushing his competitors, using the inside angle of his hands to clinch and disrupt their guard. In these ways, Moore immediately neutralized any potential counters, while remaining in close range to deliver follow-up shots. And Moore was excellent at close-range fighting. It's generally optimal for fighters to position their head on their opponent's lead shoulder while clinching, to avoid the rear hand. But Moore's guard and mastery of angles meant he was comfortable working from either side. This allowed him more potential lines of attack. Here we see Archie cross his hand over to control his competitor's opposite hand and create an opening. It would make sense to think that a fighter would have a disadvantage in speed and position when throwing punches from a crossed guard. But Moore's technical footwork often left him perfectly lined up with his target. It is true that when Moore stood squared up with crossed arms, he would have to open up and throw wide to connect. But all it took was a quick step to the side to align Moore's hand with his opponent's head or ribs. This was effectively the same feel for Moore as punching from his narrow, long-range stance. After all, the only difference between a narrow stance and an open stance for a fighter is his position relative to his opponent. And the fact that Moore was comfortable in any situation meant that he could easily step out sideways or pivot to catch his competitors as they tried to exit an exchange, or counter them if they tried to step around him. In the same way that it was near impossible to effectively outflank Moore's open stance, opponents had an equally difficult time trying to penetrate Moore's narrow stance to attack him head-on. Most fighters, when their competitor steps inside with a jab, will try to pivot to maintain their sideways position, many times firing off their own jab as they do so. While Moore was competent and capable of doing this, he was also entirely comfortable staying where he was and leaving himself open, or even jabbing off of lateral movement. This meant he could counter from his current position before his opponent had completed stepping into their position, taking them completely by surprise. Many times, Moore would even step out wider, slipping or blocking before connecting with the counter. He was especially fond of doing this when an opponent stepped in with a deep cross, showing him one of his own. What it comes down to is that Moore did not need to try to adjust to maintain a favored guard position, and this held true whether his opponent tried to sidestep his forward stance or circle his narrow stance. Moore knew the position his opponent was trying to get him into inside and out, and was better fighting in it than they were. Moore applied this concept to his upper body position as well, tricking his opponents into thinking he was far more vulnerable than he actually was. His forward shoulder position presented a tempting target, and when his opponent attacked, Moore would either pivot in with a tight lead hook, beating him to the punch, or he would quickly turn away to let his opponent's hand sail far past, much like a matador pulling away the cape from a bull. He would then snap out a short, tight cross. It's the same concept as a shoulder roll or a pull, but it allowed Moore to stay more balanced and much closer to his opponent when he countered. This is in fact the exact punch that knocked down Rocky Marciano in their epic battle. The last thing to understand before exploring how Moore put everything together is his head movement and feints. Moore entered and exited exchanges with beautiful head movement, able to use the full range of lateral movement in his sideways stance, and lean far back in his narrow stance. His balance was phenomenal, and he was one of the few fighters besides Muhammad Ali who could weave while cross-stepping. His cross-arm guard did allow an extra layer of protection, but it was mainly used to absorb and deflect blows when his head movement failed him.
In the air. This has got to
Get mechanic training at Universal Technical Institute and learn the skills needed to pursue a career you can be proud of.
To work hard and dedication and be proud of what you do, and to realize every time you work on a car, it's your reputation, so you give your 110%.
Build an in-demand skill set and prep.
That wasn't to say that his guard didn't save him on occasion, helping him to weather a barrage of punches when hurt, before adjusting and coming back to win the fight. Moore's constant head movement, hand milling, and elbow flares left his opponents uncertain when an attack was coming. Here we see how, after being driven to the ropes, he reclaims the center of the ring off of feints alone. So devastating were the punches of Archie Moore that simply flicking his hand would make his opponents back up from a superior position. Now that we understand how Moore's style seamlessly blended together, let's look at one of his best exchanges. Archie's opponent rushes in, but Moore sidesteps him and slips his jab, then clinches, pivots, and raises his guard. His opponent now attempts to land a cross, but Moore elbow blocks, cross frames with his rear hand, and then steps back into a narrow stance with an open guard. His opponent once more tries to land a 1-2, but this time Moore snaps his shoulders sideways, letting the punches sail past. He then fires out a tight cross as his opponent falls into his punch, stunning him. Moore now steps to the side and turns with his opponent, then finishes him off against the ropes. Archie had been knocked down 4 times earlier in the fight, but had weathered the storm and adjusted, coming back from the brink of defeat to claim victory. Archie Moore was a creative tactician who constantly outfoxed his opponents. He was that rare combination of fighter, fearless and crafty. He had raw strength and speed, but it was his ring IQ that allowed him to dominate at the top for so many years. Moore's record still holds to this day, and is unlikely to be beat with the rate that modern-day boxers fight. But even if they did, it's hard to imagine another fighter like Archie Moore, the old mongoose. Don't forget to share, like, and subscribe. And you could purchase my book Power of the Pros and his companion videos at the link below. For the Modern Martial Artist, this has been David Christian, wishing you happy training.
Wix. One platform, any website. Unlimited creation. Describe your needs and goals. And AI will transform your tailored brief into a unique website that's ready to perform in minutes. Customize it. Shape your visitor's experience with show-stopping visuals and interactions.
Iron Mike Tyson was one of the most powerful fighters to ever lace up gloves. Nearly every punch Tyson threw had the potential to knock out his competitors. What set Tyson apart from the common brawlers of his era was his commitment to technique and his vast knowledge of the fundamentals of boxing. Tyson knew power mechanics so well he could use risky, unorthodox methods against even skilled competitors. This resulted in Tyson developing two punches that were absolutely devastating to his opponents: his arching uppercut and leaping left hook. At first glance, Tyson's leaping hook looks a lot like a gazelle punch. The gazelle punch, a shuffling lead hook, has a history of being used by the greats. And while Tyson's punch began the same way, his mastery of shifting stances allowed him to turn this punch into something far more complex and powerful. Tyson's leaping hook used footwork in between a shift and a shuffle. Rather than put his back foot to his front, Tyson would forcefully shift his hips and widen his stance, traveling off-angle far past his opponent's center line. In other words, by the time it had connected, his lead hook had usually turned into a rear hook. I've mentioned before how Tyson liked to fight close to his opponents in an open, staggered stance. It was this open stance that Tyson transitioned to in mid-air when throwing his leaping hook. Tyson could use this stance to intercept his opponents, regardless of which way they moved. If his adversary moved to the outside, Tyson would cut them off and run them right into his hook. If they circled inside, he would shift right and catch them mid-pivot. This was all the same punch from the same position. The only thing that had changed was which way Tyson's opponent was moving. This punch was not only versatile, but extremely powerful. Tyson created a wide arc that rapidly shortened, increasing his momentum and velocity. He began in a deep crouch and shifted his entire body weight from foot to foot, widening his base as he did so. And to top it all off, because Tyson crossed far past his opponent's center line, he was able to get the same rotation and follow through from his lead hand that he would normally get from his backhand. While his hook punch may have ended the majority of his fights, Tyson's arching uppercuts stand out as his most iconic move. His positioning was so unique, they even animated it into the popular Nintendo game, Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. The uppercut is probably the most misunderstood strike in competitive fighting. Many fighters twist their hips into their uppercuts as their only form of building momentum. This pulls the fist sideways rather than straight up. In his book Championship Fighting, the great Jack Dempsey suggests dropping down and then swaying your hips forward instead. Tyson took this advice to heart. At this extreme angle, Tyson's hips are able to stretch his shoulder and whip his hand forward. This created a perfect angle for his punch to travel, straight through the small gap in his opponent's guard. Tyson usually threw this punch at the exact moment his opponents tried to clinch, taking a small step back into southpaw. They went to grab his arms, but his extreme lean back meant that his arms were gone. The only thing left there was Tyson's fist. Tyson was an expert at taking away his competitors' options, and leaving them with narrowing choices that just got worse and worse. At times, it becomes hard to define which stance Tyson is actually in, or what kind of punch he's actually throwing. But really, these are just names that we give to help conceptualize movements and positions. True masters can bend or break these rules, and Tyson in his prime was absolutely one of boxing's greatest masters. Leave suggestions for fighters you want to see broken down in the comments. I'm doing as many suggestions as possible. By the way, while going through the footage, I couldn't stop laughing when I noticed that Tyson had lifted this fighter's feet completely off the ground. It's probably him jumping as a reflex from getting hit, but it's Tyson, so who knows. Thanks for all the kind words and encouragement, guys. For the Modern Martial Artist, this has been David Christian, wishing you happy training.
is everybody still wasting their time trying to learn how to skip ads? Just download Pi and move on. This Chrome extension takes 5 seconds to set up and it blocks ads on any website you...
Muhammad Ali is well known for his incredible footwork and hand speed, but he also had a brilliant and unorthodox method of defense. He called it his lean back style, and in this video, we'll break down how he used head movement, footwork, and devastating counters to dominate his opponents. Then we'll quickly expand on our last video, and explain how Ali added combinations to his circling footwork pattern. Ali had incredible defense, and it wasn't just his reflexes, but his creative movement which allowed him to pull things off few other fighters could. When his opponents attacked, Ali would usually step back, slip, and drop his hands even lower. This goaded his adversaries to overreach, chasing after his head. Overextending lowered the height and power of their jab, and Ali would change levels and pick off the blows with his shoulders. He was essentially expanding the height advantage he usually enjoyed. Incredibly, Ali was such a great judge of distance that he could narrowly dodge blows by turning his chin. This allowed him to stay closer to his adversary, which kept him in range to counter. But more on that in a second. Let's look at the defensive footwork Ali used in conjunction with head movement. Ali's defensive footwork pattern is step back, shift back and angle out to the left, and then pivot. He preferred to slip to the inside and tended to change head position once for each step. Here's an unobstructed view. 1, 2, 3. If you have limited space, you can substitute the pivot for a shuffle. Stepping back allowed Ali to angle to the inside and let his opponent go right past him, like a matador sidestepping a bull. The pivot would then realign Ali in a superior position, with his rival more open and Ali ready to continue circling and jabbing. Keep in mind that while using this defensive footwork, even Ali would raise his right hand against especially good hook punchers and his left hand against those with a powerful cross. But he preferred to parry or deflect punches off his elbows in order to drain his opponents of energy. Ali would sometimes modify his defensive footwork to set up an attack. Stepping back left his rear hand much closer to his opponent, and he took full advantage of the situation to go on the offensive. He would stop short, square up, and leap into a cross. But as powerful as this technique was, it was nowhere near as effective as his counters. Ali would get his opponent used to this pattern, and then lull them into thinking he would always retreat from their attacks. He would then stop short and throw his self-titled anchor punch. Ali would lean back and slip to the inside as usual, looking to get the perfect distance from which to throw his counter right. Since he turned his head to the side, he had to rely partially on touch to gauge distance. That's why jabbing the right side of Ali's body was like hitting a button that released a fight-ending punch. As he moved his head back, his hand would come from below his competitor's field of vision and remain out of sight by following his own jab back to him. Then Ali's glove would arch over their shoulder and snap down. Those Ali hit with this punch calmly said that they had never even seen it coming. Ali most likely took his iconic circling pattern from his idol, Sugar Ray Robinson. Let's look at how Ali modified it to throw combinations while circling. To review quickly, Ali's footwork is step, hop and jab, push off and swing your back leg behind you, step back into stance, and repeat. By adding additional punches to this pattern, Ali was able to change the line of attack with each punch, giving him built-in defense and hitting around his competitor's guard. Ali placed his second punch on the last step of the sequence, as he stepped out and uncrossed his legs. This included his jab-jab, jab-hook, and jab-uppercut combos. But let's look at Ali's most effective combination, his jab-jab cross. Ali would jab on the hop as normal, change positions with the cross step, and then let his 1-2 go as he stepped out. From the front, with no pivoting. 1, 2, 3, 4. This combination used manipulation of timing to gain an advantage over his opponent. Notice that after Ali establishes a rhythm with the circling jab, the 1-2 comes in on the last step at twice the speed in half beats. After jabbing, stepping out from crossed legs loaded up Ali's cross with more momentum, adding surprising power for a boxer up on his toes. This is an interesting technique to end the breakdown on. Ali would sometimes throw his jab on 2 as normal, and then his cross on step 3 as he crossed his legs behind him. Nothing about this punch should work, but he managed to land it with decent power. We'll just put it down to him being Muhammad Ali, the greatest of all time. While I wouldn't recommend copying all of Ali's style, especially without years of experience, I encourage you to try a few things and let us know how it goes. Please like, subscribe for more videos, and share with people who may find these techniques interesting. I've also set up a Patreon page if you'd like to show your appreciation and help support the channel. For the Modern Martial Artist, this has been David Christian, wishing you happy training.
Steps there. It is a par here at 12.
Okay, when I'm shopping for new furniture or a mattress, I only shop at Ashley, because their Purchase with Purpose program ensures a portion of what I...
Sugar Ray Robinson is widely regarded as the best pound-for-pound boxer of all time. With his slick footwork and terrifying punches, Robinson was incredibly dangerous. You could write an entire book about Robinson's techniques, but for this video, we'll be breaking down his legendary punching power. When Robinson decided to go for a knockout, he would load up his hand far behind his body. Usually if a fighter throws a swing, it's because they don't know how to punch properly. But Robinson swung to build up speed, and then turned it into a tight, well-structured punch at the last second. He used the weight of his body to pull his hand forward, keeping his arm loose and fast until the last moment. This is what's happening when you see his shoulder catch and then whip forward. He did this down the length of his entire kinetic chain, each movement adding momentum to the next.
With the sandwich.
Legs to hip,
and boy, does this look
shoulder
good.
to elbow.
That's an excellent strike.
This is known in kinesiology as the stretch short cycle, where you gain power by stretching out the muscle and then releasing the tension, like pulling and then letting go of a rubber band. So how did Robinson get away with telegraphing his punches so much? Part of it was his speed, and part of it was his habit of changing his target mid-punch. He would load up low and go high, or load up high and go low. A wide haymaker could turn into a linear cross halfway through. Reacting to the wrong punch is a mistake that you just couldn't get away with when you were fighting Sugar Ray. Like Tyson says, it's the punches you don't see that knock you out.
And he'll stay right where he is.
From a physics standpoint, bending his arms at the last possible moment quickly shortened the arc of his punch's trajectory. This means his punch got much faster right before making contact, like the way a tether ball spins faster after it loses rope. Accelerating into your target is one of the most important components of a knockout punch. It's the reason that almost every martial arts ends his punches with some kind of twist or snap. Whether it's from the wrist, shoulder, or in Robinson's case, his elbow. Keep in mind if attempting this kind of power punching that a shorter, more linear punch will always hit first, and Robinson threw these punches just as often.
And I think that may have surprised him. That carried much further
By
than
shifting
he
his weight and
anticipated.
timing his body perfectly, Robinson was able to leverage most of his weight through his target.
This is second.
By making contact just before the midway point of his arc, Ray ensured the most possible force behind his fist as it landed. This constant weight shifting from foot to foot combined with his superb balance made Robinson incredibly mobile while punching. It was rare to ever see a strike where he was not up on one foot or jumping through the air. A stable base generally means more power but less mobility. But the last thing Robinson needed to worry about was power. He often leaped into his hooks and swung his back foot out on crosses, landing in a superior position a good deal of the time. Subscribe if you'd like to keep up to date on new videos as they come out. We have another video planned for Muhammad Ali, who was actually greatly influenced by Robinson, and more MMA fighters like GSP. Until next time, this is David from the Modern Martial Artist, wishing you happy training. Rocky Marciano is the only undefeated heavyweight champion of all time. Even Muhammad Ali said he didn't know if he could have beaten him. Best known for his powerful punches and relentless determination, Rocky possessed the shortest reach of any known heavyweight champion in history. It was this seeming disadvantage that led Rocky to develop one of the most unorthodox and devastating styles of fighting that has ever been seen. Today we're going to be looking at Rocky's left hook, which he used to evade punches, cover distance, set up his incredible overhand right, and yes, even knock his opponents out cold. Rocky almost always started his left hook by ducking under his opponent's jab. Not only did this keep him safe, it added power and inertia as he swung his arm around in a loop, completing the rotation of his upper body.
When in doubt,
Truly the most unorthodox and unconventional part of this punch, Rocky crossed his back leg in front of his lead foot. This allowed him to cover much more distance and set up for a more powerful punch. Watch Frazier attempt to hook punch Muhammad Ali. He keeps his balance by taking small steps forward, but lacks the ability to cover distance. Now watch Rocky. Shuffling into his punch allows for a much better range, crucial for someone with a much shorter reach. Step 3. Rocky not only shuffled, but leaped into his hook punch. Notice that both feet are off the ground. Remember how in my last videos I showed Boss Ruben and Bruce Lee taking their power from the ground? This is the exact opposite technique. By becoming airborne, Rocky Marciano allows all of his weight to enter into his punch at the same time. He's like one giant fist. The closest comparison I can make to this setup is the shuffle-in roundhouse kick. Rocky Marciano is truly one of the greats. Expect more videos on him in the future. Check out the rest of my technique breakdowns here and like and subscribe for more. Feel free to leave any suggestions on what to break down next in the comment section. Until next time, this has been David Christian from The Modern Martial Artist.
So that sets up a
Happy
tougher
training.
second shot, missing the fairway with the drive, now in the rough.
So it's book your next hotel.
If you don't book, it's a shame.
So it's resort.
Sweet vacation home for your next great stay.
I thought diabetics couldn't eat donuts.
Impressive to get power on that second shot into the par 5 and comfortably get it up here by the green. I know it's in that green side bunker, but that is very doable.
Many fighters have power. Many fighters have balance. And many fighters have mobility. But Sugar Ray Leonard had all three. Leonard took inspiration for his style from Sugar Ray Robinson and Muhammad Ali. He used fast, fluid motion and complex footwork to outmaneuver and confuse his opponents. He could effortlessly move in any direction he wished, able to not only catch his opponents, but put power into the shots while doing so. So let's take it step by step, and look at the techniques that made Sugar Ray Leonard so unique. Like Ali and Robinson, Leonard began most fights by landing powerful jabs while circling to the inside. Particularly, double jabs to the head and body. The head shots would sting and swallow his opponent's eyes shut, impairing their vision. And the body shots would win them and take away their legs. There are broadly two ways to step to the inside in a fight, both having different uses. The first is the method taught to all new boxers, and involves moving the foot in the direction you're going first. In other words, if you're moving left, your left foot moves first. This technique does square you up, opening you to more attacks, but also allows easier use of your rear hand and better lateral movement. The second technique is a cross step, moving your back foot first. This sacrifices some stability and makes it harder to hit with your power hand, but it also narrows your body and makes it easier to pivot. So it's perfect for circling and jabbing at long range. Leonard used both the traditional and cross-step technique while circling, opening up to shuffle out and change angles, and cross-stepping to jab and take a more defensive position. In this way, he could change angles every time his opponent got set, and then jab at them from a defensive posture as they readjusted. Leonard's linear movement, his ability to move in and out, was equally as impressive. He would establish a pattern and rhythm before manipulating both to set up strikes. In this clip, Leonard feints by double stepping, making his competitor overreact with his foot movement alone. Leonard would establish this feint and then mix it with real strikes throughout his fights, leaving his opponents overreactive and guessing. He would sometimes jab on a second step, sometimes both steps, sometimes even adding a third. When Leonard had his opponent thoroughly confused, he would add on cross. Once again, he played with the pattern, adding and subtracting punches. Every time an opponent reacted to a step instead of a real strike, a new opening was created for Leonard to exploit. What's truly impressive is that Leonard set all of these combinations up off of lead foot movement alone. Leonard was a master at combining his linear and lateral movement together to gain an incredible range of motion. He did this mainly through L-stepping, sliding one foot back and the other to the side in the shape of an L.
25 feet for birdie.
By doing so, he was able to quickly and fluently move in any direction he chose, able to attack off angle or escape from the corner back to the center of the ring. But what made Leonard truly formidable was his ability to manipulate his distance so rapidly and effortlessly while attacking. Even when throwing everything he had to try to knock out an opponent, his feet were moving faster than his hands, adjusting by inches to stay at the perfect distance and create openings. As I said before, many fighters have power, many fighters have balance, and many fighters have mobility. But a fighter with all three is truly something special. From the Modern Martial Artist, this has been David Christian, wishing you happy training. Gennady Triple G Golovkin is one of the most powerful and skillful strikers alive today. Offensively and defensively, Triple G's style is built around unrelenting aggression. Let's take a look at how he manages to charge forward and knock out his opponents while taking such little damage himself. Golovkin uses the stiff, heavy jab, leaning forward to build momentum and stepping into his punch. He stays deceptive by constantly changing the level of his guard, alternating his rhythm and direction. The fact his straightest, closest punch holds so much power makes his opponents overreact to feints. Triple G will also lead with his rear hand. Like Joe Louis, Golovkin likes to step to his left and unpin his back foot, opening up his hips to swing through for more torque. This technique makes it easy for him to shift forward into southpaw and chase his competitor. Golovkin's heavy hands makes his opponent much more receptive to feints, and easier for him to drive his opponents against the ropes. Triple G is a complete master at cutting off the ring. He does so by cross-stepping his lead foot in front of his back, which keeps his stance narrow and allows him to move farther forward with each step. Moving diagonally forward rather than just sideways is the trick to taking away your opponent's escape routes. By keeping his weight forward and not opening his stance, Golovkin can smoothly transition into his jab or cross. He uses straight punches to enter into close range, keeping his glove where it is and moving his body forward to retract his punch. Once he's pressed up close, Golovkin will lean into his opponent, pushing them off balance and then attacking. While Golovkin will occasionally back up or shoulder roll, his primary method of defense is stepping forward into an oncoming attack. This has led some to believe that Golovkin is getting lucky or relying on his chin. And while it's generally true that Triple G is willing to take some shots to throw his own, the technique he's using takes an incredible amount of skill. Golovkin is using a combination of head movement and a tight guard to press forward and stay in close range. He moves his head just enough to allow his opponent's punches to slide off his arms and shoulders, deflecting their impact and setting up opportunities to pressure or counter. Golovkin prefers to fight at a very dangerous range, where his opponent can easily hit him without the need to step forward or readjust in the slightest. At the same time, fighting right in the pocket means that Golovkin can easily step in and deflect a punch before it's gained power. And while Triple G is close enough to easily smother punches, he's far away enough to move his upper body to different sides in the center. At this range, Triple G is able to attack his opponents from the side and throw devastating liver punches with only a slight step to the left. Golovkin uses the weight of his body to propel his fists forward, letting his hand lag behind it to the last possible second. His upper body movement protects his head by taking it offline and builds momentum for his strike. The curving load-up gives the added benefit of making Triple G's punches highly unpredictable, with many changing from angular to linear, or corkscrewing at the last second. All of these techniques add up to Golovkin being one of the most powerful and gutsiest fighters out there. His domination will undoubtedly continue, provided he doesn't encounter a powerful counterpuncher who likes to throw to the body.
Wayward from the tee,
then
and
it may be a toss-up.
Is headed for the rough, Frank.
From the Modern Martial Artist,
Walking the course today,
this has been David
bring
Christian.
in Nota
Wishing
Begay
you
the third.
happy training.
106 gets to the hole, ball sitting down just a bit, but he should be able to handle it.
Gennady Triple G Golovkin versus Canelo Alvarez was one of the best fights in recent memory. It was clear from the time that the fight was announced that these two men were a perfect stylistic matchup for each other.
A good shot out of that
Triple G is a high-volume pressure
Aaron has had
fighter
a good
who
look
likes to corner his
on this
opponents
for birdie.
and finish them off against the
Well,
ropes.
this is a big swinging
In
putt
contrast,
right to
Canelo
left
relies
from
on
start to
unorthodox
finish.
counterpunches that come from odd angles. The question going into the fight was if Canelo could effectively counter Triple G's aggressive style. Triple G's main tools to apply pressure and corner his opponent are a stiff, heavy jab, a shifting right hand, and pushing his opponent back at close range. Canelo had an immediate answer to Triple G's shifting cross, throwing a powerful uppercut when Triple G leaned offline. Most of these did not connect, but they did stop Golovkin's momentum, taking pressure off Canelo and allowing him to follow up with more punches.
Here at the third.
Canelo also set up counters to Triple G's body by sidestepping out of the way. When Golovkin tried to press close to Canelo to push him back, he had a short but powerful uppercut. While some of his best weapons were not working, Triple G's jab was still landing effectively. Even so, Canelo was able to stand his ground in the center of the ring, using head movement and quick counters to the body. With Golovkin's most threatening punches minimized, Canelo was able to stake his claim in the center of the ring. Triple G clearly respected Canelo's right hand, backing up nearly every time he threw it.
Right there.
For the first 3 rounds, it looked like Canelo had Triple G figured out. But then, Golovkin adjusted. Triple G had realized how overreactive Canelo was to his cross. He began to mix it up with feints and rear uppercuts. When Triple G mixed these in with his off-rhythm jabs, it became very hard for Canelo to predict what was coming next. In this way, Triple G was able to slowly and methodically build pressure on Canelo and begin to control the ring. Here in the fourth, Golovkin feints a cross, and Canelo responds with the jab. Triple G darts out and back to the same position. He moves his head offline, and then lands a jab on Canelo's guard, who steps back this time. Golovkin feints another cross, prompting Canelo to raise his guard, and Triple G splits it with his jab. Canelo takes a few steps forward now, trying to reclaim lost ground, and shoots his own jab. But Triple G lands a counter cross. Canelo's now lost more ground, but tries to move forward again.
Perfect there.
Triple G pulls, and this time he's able to sell his cross by simply leaning forward and twisting.
Under.
Canelo backs up, raises his guard and sinks down, but Triple G times him and lands a jab. Canelo throws a counter right, but Triple G slips, jabs, and feints across again. This was a painstaking process fought over inches, but over the next few rounds, Triple G began to move Canelo back towards the ropes more and more often. But Canelo often prefers his backup against the ropes, throwing powerful counters or suddenly charging forwards. Fortunately for Golovkin, he didn't fall for this trick. Triple G usually throws loaded, curving blows when he gets an opponent against the ropes. But this time, he chose to stay at range and pick Canelo apart with straight, low-risk punches. By staying at range and feinting, Triple G was able to land several well-placed shots, stepping in to pick at Canelo, and then quickly stepping out of harm's way. By the 6th round, the fight was still very back and forth. Here we see Triple G and Canelo both catch each other's jabs, and Canelo tries to counter with a hard right. But Triple G slips the punch and throws his own cross. He stalks Canelo to the ropes.
Nah, the putter bails him out. There, that's in for a
At this
par.
point, Canelo is
And
so
he'll
responsive to
remain well in
Golovkin's right
control of
hand
this tournament.
that he reacts every time Triple G simply leans in.
Forging ahead, we come
Triple
to
G hits him with the
par
body hook
5-6.
cross combination, jabs out to a safe range, and then hits him with another 1-2. Golovkin tries to keep the pressure on, but Canelo surprises him and rushes out, backing him to the center of the ring, and then connecting with a powerful uppercut body hook combination. This same kind of scenario would play out over the next several rounds. But more and more, Canelo began to back up to the corners, and then pivot and pull away from Triple G's cross.
Shot right there.
While this technique was impressive, it usually left him in a position where he was unable to counter himself.
Yards out, a second to
In the 8th, Triple G must have felt that Canelo was weakening. He became comfortable pressing forward again. He had mixed success, eating a devastating uppercut from Canelo through the space in his guard. In the 9th, Triple G lowered and tightened his guard and pushed forward even harder.
A bit too much on the second shot on this par 5 putt. Shouldn't have too much trouble getting it up and down for the birdie.
He was finally able to land his signature curving punches from close range. But then, once again, Triple G got careless. and took an incredible right hand after pushing Canelo back to the corner. At this point, both fighters had taken shots that would put most men in the hospital and simply shrugged it off. Undisturbed by each other's power, the next 3 rounds would be a total war. Triple G upped the pressure even more in the 10th. Although he took a number of body shots as he pressed forward, he was able to bully Canelo through most of the round. In the 11th, Canelo got aggressive, and we got to see some amazing exchanges like this one. Triple G and Alvarez both jab. Canelo catches Golovkin's hand on his guard, and Golovkin slips to the inside and throws a powerful cross.
So far, and that's another great
Canelo just
drive,
manages to slip
good opportunity
and then
to
charges
make
forward.
another birdie.
Golovkin weaves away, and the exchange ends with no clear winner.
Put it in a great spot off the tee. Has just 86 yards left for his
In this
second shot.
exchange,
See what he can do with
Canelo
this.
pulls away from Golovkin's right and counters with a right of his own. Triple G ducks under it and throws a long hook that Canelo just slips. Alvarez throws a looping jab, and Triple G follows it back to smother Canelo. But Canelo controls Golovkin's lead hand and head and shoots a short, straight right into Golovkin's chin. In the 12th, both Canelo and Triple G put it all on the line. Canelo attacked with everything he had, and Triple G took the shots and still pressed forward relentlessly. They battled it out until the final bell. While the fight was close, with both fighters landing a near equal amount of power shots, Triple G landed far more punches overall and controlled the pace of the fight. While there is a legitimate argument for a draw, I personally feel that Triple G won a majority of the rounds. But as I said, it was a very close fight, one deserving of a rematch. From the Modern Martial Artist, this has been David Christian, wishing you happy training.
An elegant touch for an everyday meal. Vanity Fair napkins elevate every day.
When you know that parent-approved providers are ready to take care of your kids all week.
Roy Jones Jr. was one of the most gifted fighters to ever enter the ring. Cut from the same cloth as Sugar Ray Robinson, Muhammad Ali, and Sugar Ray Leonard, Jones utilized complex footwork and insane hand speed to outmaneuver and outperform his opponent. Jones would suddenly switch between patient and subtle footwork to aggressive flurries and risky one-punch knockouts. And perhaps there is no kind of punch more risky in the history of boxing than the one you see Jones throwing here.
This is a long, long putt coming
Arms wide open, chin forward, charging towards his opponent. A punch I like to call the dive bomb. The danger for Jones when throwing this punch goes beyond simply leaving his hands low. He's not only completely exposing himself, he's taking away his ability to quickly block or parry, and leading with his chin. By all rationale, this punch shouldn't work. Even with Jones' amazing speed and natural talent, this technique was insanely risky. So how did he pull this off, and why did it work so well? The answer has to do with Jones' primary weapon, his leading right hand. Jones used his rear hand the same way most fighters use their jab. It was his primary weapon to keep distance, wear down opponents, and set up combinations. At the same time, this jab contained knockout power. In the same way Muhammad Ali used his circling jab to quickly score and then get out of range before his opponent could counter, Jones would throw his cross to enter and then leave by a completely different angle. His most common technique was to throw his cross while switch stepping into an open or even southpaw stance. He would then escape by shuffling out to either side. In this clip, Jones lands with his right hand as he switch steps to a more neutral stance, and then shuffles out to the inside to change the angle, avoiding a counter. Here we see Jones throw his cross, and then step back into southpaw to avoid a left hook counter. This is essentially a shifting shoulder roll. Jones could also pivot off his lead foot as he threw his cross to create a different angle of attack and escape. It kept his opponents guessing, and was particularly useful against southpaws. Using these techniques, Jones combined his attack and retreat into one seamless movement. This is similar to the multi-stance style used by Mike Tyson. But whereas Tyson used to go toe-to-toe with his competitors, and angled off to create openings. Jones would change angles to avoid counters and reposition himself at long range. That being said, Jones was also able to use his leading rear hand to chase after his opponents and set up combinations. His switch step allowed him to easily shift forward and chase after his opponent in southpaw. Jones' right hand was extremely versatile and contained knockout power. This left his opponents overreactive to any movement from his right hand at all, and it was this fear that allowed Jones to throw his dive bomb. Watch how Jones prepares his right hand to land. He wings his right arm, sometimes completely straightening it. He lowers his left hand and slips to the side, putting most of his weight onto his lead leg. Once he got his opponent wary of this setup, Jones would perform the same motion, but instead throw both arms out wide, shuffling forward and connecting with his left as a hook or an uppercut. Focusing hard on his right hand, his opponents would often block the wrong side.
Birdie putt coming up. We go to Iona Steven.
There is a sneaky bit of break from left to right on this putt, but don't overdo it.
Here Jones spreads both arms out wide, and his opponent guesses that a right hand and covers up his left side.
Down the slope, it's
Instead, Jones knocks him out with a lightning-fast left hook to the head.
under par.
Jones' punches were hard enough to predict in the first place, as they often began by his waist, looped around in an entirely new direction, much like Canelo does today. Add on another hand, and it's easy to see why opponents had such a hard time predicting what was coming. Here, Jones does the same thing, but this time, he goes to the body. While it's true Jones had a lot of natural speed and reflexes, the most impressive aspect of watching Jones in his prime was his creativity.
That is right, and that could
Many
be
fighters
trouble.
are fast, and many fighters have great reflexes. But Jones used his in a way that's truly astounding to watch.
A bad lie. Wicked. So he may need to choke up on
While I
this
normally
as he
encourage
gets set for
practicing
his
the
second.
techniques broken down and then trying it out in sparring, I would definitely advise against that in this case. The only thing I can think of more dangerous than the dive bomb would be trying to knock someone out with both hands behind your back. If you're interested in how Jones generated so much power in his punches, you can check out my new book, Power of the Pros. It comes with half an hour of exclusive breakdown videos, and you can get it as an ebook or in paperback.
That's about as good as you
I've
can
left the link
expect.
below. From the Modern Martial Artist, this has been David Christian, wishing you happy training.
When tools hold you back, it's more than lost time, it's lost momentum. Kyocera is here to help, not just with tools, but as your partner in the...
That nearly went in. That's
Marvelous Marvin
right
Hagler was
there.
one of the most talented,
Very good effort.
versatile, and underrated fighters of the last century. Hagler was in many ways the perfect boxer, a poised and intelligent tactician who possessed a large reserve of aggression and unrelenting determination. Talented in almost every aspect of the game, Hagler went toe-to-toe with masterful outfighter Sugar Ray Leonard, pound for pound greatest infighter of all time Roberto Duran, and terrifying powerhouse Thomas the Hitman Hearns. He beat all except Leonard, which went to a controversial decision. To top it all off, Hagler was comfortable fighting with both feet forward, and seemed to naturally transition between the two in a way that looked entirely effortless. Hagler began most of his fights boxing from the outside ring, wearing his opponents down before going in for the kill.
Another fine
Naturally
tee shot.
right-handed, Hagler still fought in a southpaw stance. This meant he could deliver some
Big
incredibly
drive
powerful
got him
shots with
here.
his lead hand.
Now a short one for his second.
His jab was a unique blend of techniques. The setup was similar to Gazelle Punch, where you shuffle forward into your lead hand attack. Gazelle punches usually involve loading most of your weight onto your lead leg, turning your torso to increase the distance between your lead hand and your target, and then shuffling forward to cover massive distance. Usually, this movement is used in tandem with a hook punch or uppercut. In contrast, Hagler shuffled into a near linear punch. This loaded shuffle provided more distance and power, and the tight angle of the straight punch made the movement more likely to hit.
And he's got it to minus 18.
The constant movement of his head to different sides of the center line allowed Hagler to non-telegraphically load his punches, as well as keep himself a moving target. But maybe the greatest advantage this punch afforded Hagler was his ability to cover insane distances. This punch was a precursor to many finishing blows, as Hagler chased after a desperate and beaten competitor. Beyond the fact that this was an incredibly powerful strike for a jab, Hagler was able to quickly pivot off of his punch to evade counters and follow up. Gazelle punches tend to require the fighter to land hard on their front foot and take additional time regaining the balance from the wide swing. But like his overall style, Hagler's jab was a unique blend of aggression and tactical precision. His powerful lead hand and precision footwork tended to hurt his opponents to his left, and this is where Hagler's effortless and natural ability to operate in both stances gained him his greatest advantage. Unlike the many multi-stance fighters who have been reviewed so far, Hagler let his opponents change stances for him, and then simply adjusted in a way they didn't expect. Rather than use stance-switching footwork to confuse his opponents and trick them into predicting the wrong technique, Hagler simply let his opponent circle away at an angle they felt they were safe, only to surprise them with a small step forward and a thunderous lead left hook. If Hagler only used one stance, he would need time to pivot and readjust. But fortunately for him, he didn't have this vulnerability. Hagler tended to infight in the later rounds, after wearing his opponents down from the outside. A strategy entirely opposite from one of his prime rivals, Roberto Duran. Hagler smothered his opponents and kept his guard tight, looking to force his way inside their guard rather than grapple. He would then maneuver his head, shoulder, or arm underneath his competitor's chin.
Boy, that one did not
this did two things. First, it raised his opponent's center of balance, creating stability for himself and taking it away from his competitor. Second, it forced his opponent's head up, leaving it open to attack, as well as exposing his midsection. Hagler's primary technique was to wedge his head into the crook of his opponent's neck and shoulder to protect himself, and then use his own shoulder and arm to deny his opponent the same protection. At the same time, he would press close to smother and trap his opponent's arms. With his opponent in his vulnerable position, Hagler would disengage and throw a tight hook before weaving away to his opponent's opposite shoulder. At first, it may seem strange that Hagler was able to score so many knockouts from such a close range. But once again, his familiarity with both stances would prove one of his best weapons. Hagler put force into his close-range punches by shifting. If his opponents charged after him, Hagler would disengage and shift into a powerful hook. And if they backed up, he would take advantage of the new space to shift forward, putting the full weight of his body into each punch. This was the brutal conclusion to Hagler's strategy. One that involved wearing down his opponents with long-range attacks from a dominant lead hand, before prying open their guard and attacking them from the inside, and then finally committing all of his force to knock them out cold. A strategy perfectly blending his skills as an intelligent boxer and a devastatingly powerful puncher. Marvin Hagler should be studied in depth by anyone looking to get better at boxing, or really almost any other style of martial arts. I encourage everyone to check out his fights. You'll be happy you did.
Oh, yes.
This is the last of the technique breakdowns for the 4 kings of boxing. But don't worry, each of their fights against each other will be covered at a later date. I've left a playlist of the other 3 king breakdowns at the end of the video. I've got another video coming out soon. It's a little different, but I think you guys are really going to like it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, and if you're interested in building more power in your strikes, you can check out my book, Power of the Pros. Comes with half an hour of exclusive fighter breakdowns. I left a link below. From the Modern Martial Artist, this has been David Christian, wishing you happy training. Guillermo Rigondeaux has one of the most unique styles in boxing today. He's a powerful southpaw whose defense is reminiscent of Floyd Mayweather's, and whose offense is an animal all of its own. Rigondeaux has been known to practice his punches in the air before connecting with the same combination. This has led some to believe that Rigo is rehearsing his punches, or even calling a punch in the same way that Babe Ruth used to call his home runs. While a probing rear hand to measure distance is nothing unusual for a southpaw, throwing slow motion combinations far away from your opponent is something else entirely. But the truth is that Rigondeaux is not measuring where his opponent is, he's measuring where they're about to be. And he knows that's where they'll be because of the elaborate trap that he set for them. This is possible because of Rigondeaux's mastery of 3 important elements in boxing: distance, timing, and drawing. Rigo stays at the perfect distance to force his opponents to take a large step forward if they want to connect.
Oh, that is how
While
you
his
get
opponents
to
must
be
reach,
world number
Rigo's
one.
already perfectly
Beautiful
balanced,
shot there to
with his
get it
punch
in
loaded
tight.
up and
Now
waiting.
this for
All he
another
needs to
birdie.
do is shut the trap.
Now this
Of
round
course, this
finished
wouldn't be
strong.
possible without
After that
Rigo's
birdie,
ability
it's
to
now
draw
15
punches.
and 16.
Drawing is when a fighter
He
tries
moves
to entice his opponent to
21 under
attack by
par.
leaving a specific opening, so that he can then counter it.
Settling in, hoping for a good one.
Many great fighters through history mastered this ability. And Rigo does this masterfully as well, but goes one step further than most. Rigondeaux gives his opponent a specific slow-motion punch off of which to counter. The genius of this is that Rigo knows the exact punches that his opponent are most likely to throw in response, as he knows the specific area in which he's left himself open. And he also knows when it's coming. Rigo's timing, particularly his tempo, stands out as one of the most consistent elements of his style. His methodical, consistent pace lulls his opponent into a false sense of comfort. He knows when the punch is coming because he knows precisely when he's intentionally left himself open.
That ball off the turf.
He will then triple his speed mid-punch, turning a slow, probing strike into a devastating blow. So to recap, Rigo forces his opponents to come to him by establishing distance, gives them a specific opening to draw a punch, and only leaves a small, but consistent window of time in which that opening appears. When his competitor takes the bait, he slips and beats him to the punch. What looks like magic is actually skill developed over years of hard work practicing the fundamentals of distance, tempo, and drawing. There's a lot more to Rigondeaux than this rarely used technique. He has excellent defense, an insane ability to alter angles mid-combination, and a name no two boxing commentators can seem to agree on how to pronounce. But don't worry, this channel will be going much more in depth in the pre-fight breakdown of Rigondeaux versus high-tech Vasily Lomachenko, coming out soon. So stay tuned. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and check out my book Power of the Pros, where I break down step-by-step the way the world's greatest boxers, kickboxers, and MMA fighters put power into their strikes. It comes with access to half an hour of exclusive breakdowns, and I've left a link below if you'd like to take a look. For the modern martial artist, this has been David Christian, saying, happy training. The fight between Vasily Lomachenko and Guillermo Rigondeaux was shocking. Lomachenko dismantled an undefeated champion widely considered one of the greatest of all time, making him quit on his stool. While the ending was disappointing, there were a lot of very high-level techniques that Lomachenko employed incredibly well throughout the fight. So let's take a look at how Lomachenko absolutely destroyed one of the greatest defenses in boxing, and then quickly examine why Rigondeaux decided to say, no mas. Rigondeaux's style is built around keeping his opponents at arm's length and maintaining a slow, steady tempo so that he can force his opponents to overreach and then counter them. In order for Lomachenko to take control of the fight, he needed to dictate the distance and pace. And Lomachenko pulled this off the very first round. He began by disrupting Rigondeaux's footwork. Every time Rigondeaux got settled in place to set up an exchange, Lomachenko immediately circled away and changed angles. Notice how Lomachenko moves away every time Rigondeaux sinks down onto his lead leg. By taking away his ability to ground himself, Lomachenko took away Rigondeaux's power and balance. Once Lomachenko had disrupted Rigondeaux's footwork, he began dismantling one of his best tools, his lead right hand. Rigondeaux keeps a closed, narrow stance with few openings, and uses his lead arm like a shield, blocking punches with his forearm or elbow. He uses tactile senses to gauge the intentions of his opponents and set up his counters. But Lomachenko took away Rigondeaux's attempt at lead hand control using his own lead hand. He would feint high and low and circle and deflect Rigondeaux's arm like a fencer. He would throw multiple jabs before changing position to repeat the process again. Lomachenko was now effectively able to get close to Rigondeaux and fight at his preferred range. It had taken him less than a round to accomplish what no other boxer had before. And woven through all of these techniques was Lomachenko's use of broken rhythm. Once Lomachenko had taken away Rigondeaux's footwork and lead hand control, he neutralized Rigondeaux's second line of defense, his upper body movement. Like Mayweather, Rigondeaux likes to lean back, duck, and pivot to change the angle. The technique is a great way to stay in the center of the ring and avoid getting caught on the ropes. But his over-reliance on this defensive maneuver turned into a major problem for Rigondeaux. Lomachenko's footwork allows him to easily follow a pivoting opponent, and he took advantage of Rigondeaux's low crouch by framing off of his shoulders. Lomachenko is an expert at manipulating his opponent's guard at close range. His goal is to destroy his opponent's balance, vision, and ability to counter. He'll pin his opponent's arms in place, pull down their guard to create new openings, use his glove or forearm to keep them in the dark, and frame against their neck to destroy their balance and power. Notice how Lomachenko moves in and immediately pins both of Rigondeaux's arms and leans his weight on him. When Rigondeaux tried to lean back instead of crouch and pivot, Lomachenko simply tracked his head movement with jabs. Rigondeaux did get off one good attempt at a powerful left hook that Lomachenko narrowly ducked at the end of the round. But Lomachenko wouldn't let himself get into this position again for the duration of the fight. Once again, Lomachenko managed all of this during the first round of the fight, and it would continue the same way for the rest of the match, with Lomachenko getting more and more comfortable ramping up the pace, and Rigondeaux's only adjustment made being to clinch almost every exchange. In the end, Rigondeaux said he was unable to continue. It's understandable that Rigondeaux quit, but it's strange he quit with so few adjustments, repeating the same defunct techniques that had gotten him punished before for several more rounds, and throwing very few shots himself. There are a lot of questions that haven't yet been answered, and may never be. It remains a mystery how badly Rigondeaux's hand was hurt, with some questioning if it was hurt at all. Looking back through the footage, it's hard to find anything that could have damaged it heavily. It's also an odd precedent to quit over a hand injury in a championship fight. While the health of a fighter should always be of utmost importance, there are certain moments that are so critical to the sport and to the fighter's legacy that many have weathered through, and even gone on to victory, with Lomachenko himself being one of these fighters. While it's sad that such a great boxer has most likely had his career come to an end in this manner, it's truly inspiring to see Lomachenko continue to grow and improve. I'm really looking to see his upcoming fights and what the future has in store for him. That about does it for this one. You can let everyone know your own thoughts